Thank you for bearing with us. We had a Brown Act training and a lengthy closed session prior to our regular meeting. Welcome to the Tuesday, January 12th, 2021 regular business meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors, our first meeting of the year. Happy New Year to everyone. Due to COVID-19 and in accordance with the governor's executive order and the latest Alameda County Health Order, which suspend portions of the Brown Act, this meeting will be conducted remotely. And in compliance with those orders, no physical location has been provided. And these measures will only apply during the period in which state or local public health officials have imposed or recommended social distancing. The Planning Committee and the Legislative Human Resources Committee met this morning. We will hear an in-depth report from on our Legislative Committee in our agenda, as well as both committees will report out under item 20. And the board lastly received its annual update on the Brown Act and the board's ethics policy during the public portion of this morning's closed session meeting. We'll now turn to roll call, and all directors will be participating via Zoom. Madam Secretary, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Directors Coleman.
Present.
Katz.
Present.
Lenny.
Present.
McIntosh.
Here.
Mellon.
Present.
Patterson.
Present.
President Young.
I am here. Okay, our next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll please stand if you are able and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right. Next up, oh wait, and we have no announcements from our closed session meeting. Whoops. Cannot take this. Okay. Next up, we have our election of officers, which means that every 2 years we do a rotation of our leadership of the board. And after 2 years of serving in that capacity, I will be moving on. And I just want to say first, thank you all so much for for the opportunity to do that and to preside over a number of important policy developments, and other organizational priorities, including bringing on our new general manager, Clifford Chan, coordinating with everyone on our diversity and inclusion and response to racism in our country and in our own district, as well as coping with the pandemic and trying to balance our desire and duty to protect our employees, but also to deliver vital services, out of which I think we have many lessons learned, many things about how we operate, from mundane things like what happens when people use more water at home during the day than they usually do because they're all at home, to issues like how do we help people pay for water, and out of that come up with a policy that actually expands and extends the concept of the human right to water, which we hope will continue. So I'm, I feel like it's been time well spent, and I'm looking forward to getting back on committees, which I missed. Sort of knowing what was going on at a more granular level. And with that, I will open nominations for president of the board, and would like to take the opportunity to nominate our current vice president, Doug Linney, in that capacity.
And I'd like to second Doug's nomination.
I would like to move to close nominations.
Do we need a second on the move to close the nominations?
Second.
Yes, please.
Okay, so we have, now we get to do a roll call vote.
Well, that went pretty fast. That almost looked like the fix was in there.
Or the railroad was in.
I'm willing to accept.
Or the
So we
railroad
accept
was
the
in, Doug.
nomination, okay.
Right.
Then we need a roll call vote.
Yes, we had a nomination by President Young and seconded by Director Coleman to nominate Doug Linney for president of the board for 2021. Roll call vote. Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Linney,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes. Okay, so the next item is, oh, actually, do I turn the gavel over to Doug at this point?
You
Yeah.
turn the gavel.
Ceremoniously, take it away, Doug.
Thank you all. I really appreciate your confidence in nominating me and electing me as the president of the board. I don't have a lot of comments. I do want to just say that I do look forward to this opportunity. I hope to meet the standards that we've come accustomed to with President Young in the past 2 years. Her great facilitation and great decorum for running the meetings and facilitating, making sure both the public is heard and that the board members are fully given an opportunity to voice their opinion and stance on things. I also, of course, look forward to working. One of the privileges of being board president is working closely with the EBMUD's general manager. And so I do look forward to working with Clifford, General Manager Chan, very closely, and of course with the rest of the staff. And a great privilege to be able to do that. So with that, I will entertain nominations for the 2021 vice president of the board. Maybe I'll take this privilege and nominate John Coleman for that position.
Second.
I would move closing of the nominations.
Okay. Got a motion to close the nominations after nominating John Coleman. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Then we have, we'll vote on the motion and nomination for John Coleman for vice president. Madam Secretary, will you call roll?
Yes, I just want to confirm that Director Katz seconded the nomination for Director Coleman.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Roll call vote. Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Linney,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Former
Absolutely, yes.
President Young.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you, Doug. Could I
That's a
say a
quick
couple
yes.
things?
Am I being heard?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
No, I just want to know because I've done some things and that it wasn't acknowledged. That's why I was asking. Go ahead.
Yeah, we hear you. Go ahead, John.
First of all, thank you very much for the nomination. I look forward to working with Doug and the rest of the board and management in this capacity. I also like to really thank Marguerite. I think she did one hell of a job the last 2 years, and reiterate what Doug said. It was honored to work with you, but more under your direction the last 2 years, Marguerite. So thank you very, very much. And Doug, I promise not to invoke Article 25. But it'll be a challenge next several years, and I look forward to working with Doug and the rest of you in that capacity.
All right. Well, thank you, John. I look forward to working with you as well. At this time, we are open for public comment. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone for public comment?
We have a Mr. Bill Benham, and if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Benham, I am going to unmute your line. Please advise if you are here to speak on an item on the agenda or just under general public comment.
Yes, my name is Bill Benham with Champion Outdoor Advertising. And we were asked to partake in this meeting for 3 locations on your property for digital outdoor advertising.
And so you are speaking, that is agenda item number 16. Did you want to speak at that time?
Yes.
Okay, we will wait for that agenda item.
Thank you.
That agenda item is on the consent calendar, so we will
Correct.
take it off the consent calendar and move it to a separate item.
Risha, real quick, do we need to cover the committee assignments?
Oh, that's right.
Oh, we do need, yes, we passed that up. Thank you.
This is an opportunity. How are we doing it this year? We usually do it by a form that is filled out and returned to myself.
Correct. So in your speaker notes, the 2021 board committee assignment preferences form was emailed to you yesterday, Monday, by the secretary's office. If you could please review that form, indicate your preferences, and send those back to the secretary by next Tuesday, January 19th. And then committee preferences will be announced at the January 26th meeting.
Thank you. Did everyone get that? Any questions on that? All right. Thank you, Clifford, for reminding us of that. Any other speakers for public comment for items that are not on the agenda?
There are no other speakers under public comment.
All right. Then we'll go on to the consent calendar. 16 items for consideration, and we are pulling item number 16 for separate discussion.
Move the remainder, Mr. President.
All right.
I'll second 1 through 15 behind Lisa's motion.
All right. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Yes. Consent calendar items 1 through 15. Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Young,
Marguerite, you're on
she's
mute.
on mute.
Turn your mic on.
Yes, that's a yes. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute.
That's
I'm not
okay.
used to being on mute when I'm chairing the meeting.
And President Lenny.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so that's unanimous carries for the consent calendar. Item number 16, authorize a 2-year option agreement with Champion Outdoor Ventures. We'll have our speaker now, public speaker, to address that.
Yes.
Mr. Benham.
Mr. Benham, you can unmute your line and your time is starting now.
Yes, we look forward to working with your company. And if there's any questions that anyone would like to ask us, we certainly would love to answer them. I do have representation waiting, and also my advertising broker nationwide that is here for questioning also. Her name is Diane.
Great. All right. Anyone have any questions for our speaker?
I would move the item.
All right. Do you have a second?
Second.
All right. Moved by Director Mellon, seconded by Director McIntosh. Madam Secretary, please call roll for item 16.
Directors Coleman, Director Coleman, are you still there? It looks like he may have dropped off. He
Left already.
did. Okay,
Not a good sign for a new vice president.
okay.
No, I just
Director-
came back on. Yes, it disappeared and I had to reboot on.
Okay, Director Coleman, yes. Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young. She's
Mute.
coming up.
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, item carries unanimously. We are on to determination of discussion, legislative update. Marlene.
Hi, good afternoon. I want to start by suggesting that we start with the state item, and then we have Eric Saperstein with us today to provide an overview of what's happening in DC before we get into the federal initiatives that we also have for you today. So starting with the state legislative report, we have one bill with a position recommendation for you. The bill is ACA 1, and we are recommending a support position. This bill is about local government financing. And with regard to East Bay MUD, it would lower the voter threshold to 55% for special taxes that a special district may opt to impose for infrastructure projects. There are two other provisions of the measure that apply to cities and counties and school districts. But this is a measure that East Bay MUD has supported many, many times, most recently last year. And it's back for another try this year, and we're recommending a support on this one.
All right, any questions? This went through our committee this morning.
Yes, Doug, it did, and our committee voted on a 3-0 vote to support it.
All right. Any questions, comments?
So I understand that it's limited to infrastructure projects, but is not available to other programs of public importance?
With regard to special districts, Director Katz?
Correct.
Yes.
It is of interest. We have a customer assistance program and anticipate further needs for revenue. If there is an opportunity for discussion in the legislature, I would be interested in any monitoring of opportunities to expand, but it often does seem like these ballot measures are polled well in advance. So I would understand if decision makers have already decided what form this measure could be in, but I personally would be interested in broader authority to put in front of voters.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? When does this, it has to go to the voters, is that correct?
Yes, if it passes the legislature, then it goes before the voters.
And that would be when?
2022.
Okay. No special election or anything for this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then let's, I guess I need a motion. We're ready to go.
I'll move item 17, state report.
Second.
All right. Motion made by Director Coleman, seconded by Director Patterson. We'll have a roll call vote.
Yes. Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young.
Okay, I'm just leaving it off mute. I'm just going to leave it off mute. Yes.
And President Lenny.
Yes. All right, that's unanimous. passage for that.
I have a couple of quick updates, and then I'd like to turn it over to Eric to give an overview of what's happening in Washington. Two quick updates, one at the state level. I almost said president. Governor Newsom introduced his proposed budget on Friday. That's the first step in the state's budget process. And it is a big budget. It's about $227 million. And he is proposing some immediate COVID-related actions, some shorter term after immediate COVID-related actions. Then we expect to see the May revision to his budget proposal. And in June is when the legislature will start crafting their final budget proposal. It looks like we're going to see quite a bit of action in terms of trying to get some more COVID relief and some vaccine related actions with regard to this budget in the coming weeks. Anything of relevance to East Bay MUD, we will bring to the board. And we're also going to do a high level memo for you, an information memo for this week's mailing on the state budget proposal. And at the federal level, as you are probably aware, there was a fourth COVID relief package approved at the end of December. And there is some ratepayer assistance in that package. It's not a lot of money, but it is money. It's about 600 and some odd $1 million nationwide. And that will be allocated to the states, and the states will then allocate it to water and wastewater utilities. And we are working with the governor's office on that as we speak to make sure East Bay MUD has a place in line for that relief. And barring any questions, I'd like to open the floor to Eric.
Welcome,
Thank
Eric.
you, Marlene. Hello, everybody. Glad to see all your faces. And I want to express my congratulations to Director, now President Linney, and Vice President Coleman, and to former President Young. I hope you have a good retirement as just a committee member. In all seriousness, Marlene and I had a nice presentation set up, and unfortunately, and I mean that seriously, the events of the past week sort of disrupted it. So if you guys will allow me to go over some of what's happening right now on the political front, and then I'll go into sort of the substantive East Bay MUD issues. Maybe that's the best way to handle it.
Are you saying you disrupted putting the presentation together, or the politics have changed so radically that your predictions for the coming year are different?
Thankfully, the predictions for the coming year are saved by January 20th. Unfortunately, the first part of your point is well taken. The presentation was disrupted by QAnon and other, shall we say, forces of whatever. So here's the situation. You've seen it on TV. I think the best way, I'm going to quote an FBI agent that gave a press conference this morning. The Capitol is literally a crime scene at this point. It is cordoned off. Under normal circumstances, it would have some kind of protective layer attached to it because of the inauguration. But right now, we are watching 15,000 National Guards troops arrive. The city will go on lockdown tomorrow in anticipation of the inauguration. Usually that happens on Sunday, Saturday evening before the inauguration. So there's a real challenge right now to be sort of understated about it. Tomorrow, we will have a vote in the House of Representatives. The first vote, if it goes according to game plan, will be directing the Vice President to invoke the 25th Amendment, known as the Disability Clause, to remove the President due to his inability to perform the functions of his office. That is expected to fail, and they will then proceed to go to one article of impeachment that you probably have already read about or heard on the news. Basically, an article of impeachment for insurrection and sedition. Right now, there are more than 218 of the 222 Democratic votes in favor of impeachment, so it will pass. At this count, we see about 20, give or take, a handful of extra Republicans who are going to vote for impeachment in the House. So in tandem with those numbers of ensuring that it will pass the article of impeachment, the leadership about 2 hours ago on the Republican side agreed not to, as they say, whip the vote. And so it is a vote of conscience on the part of all the members in the House of Representatives. So it is at this stage, short of something happening that we don't anticipate, impeachment will happen historically, the second only time a president has been impeached twice. Following that, there are a handful of resolutions that have been introduced to censure or expel members that were involved in the insurrection or the activities leading up to the insurrection. Most notable, Louis Gohmert from Arizona, who was down there basically spewing all sorts of terrible things during the lead up to the march into the Capitol. At the end of the day, I think the most important point I want to raise to you is about an hour ago, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell publicly stated that he believes that Trump basically committed impeachable offenses. That is on a scale of 1 to 10 and 11, given the way McConnell has reacted and acted over the past 4 years. So we don't know what that means unless, of course, he's trying to give himself cover because he can't call the Senate back because he needs unanimous consent to bring the Senate back into session before the inauguration. But I think it tells you that regardless of when the Senate comes back into session, that they will probably go into a trial to convict Donald Trump. And the reason they want to do that is to prevent him from running for office again, to deny him any kind of federal benefits like a pension. And third, and probably the third one is the first issue to really point out, is to make it clear that there are consequences for actions that he did as president or as any citizen. So that's where we are from a sort of political standpoint. I will say that it's very interesting from a sort of advocate lobbyist standpoint, how many people in our field of work have come up and said no more. And you've seen that with the trade associations, the business side saying no more money for members who voted to decertify the president-elect's election, and things of that nature. So we really are at an inflection point. And to President Linney's point, it does, I think, if there is a silver lining in a very dark cloud, it does point to the opportunity to get some things done beginning January 20th. President Linney, I'm going to stop there in case there are any questions before I get into the substantive part of the conversation.
Eric, I have a question. That was big news. I've not heard that about McConnell, which is interesting. Is it correct that if he's to be impeached in the Senate, 17 Republicans need to vote with all the Democrats, all 50, in order to actually have an impeachment?
If I remember the way impeachment works, it's just a majority.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's right.
Now,
The majority of, in both cases.
well, in the Senate, they need 2/3.
2/3 in the
Oh,
Senate.
to get the
majority
call
in the
for
House.
the vote, right. But impeachment is in the House. The trial is in the Senate, but they would also, is it true that they also need only a majority to decide to, once he is impeached, to bar him from future office? That's
So
because that's what they've used for judges in the past.
I believe you're correct, Director Young. I believe because that is a separate effort, it's just a legislative passage. Now in the Senate, of course, you still have that 60 vote threshold.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
So where are we? So first of all, let me give you a layout of where we are in Congress from a numbers point of view and what it all means. First of all, the House right now is at a majority of approximately 222 votes for the Democrats, give or take some outstanding elections to be called. I believe there's 2 elections that still have to be called, and then another 2 special or 3 special elections that have to be held over the next couple of months. But at the end of the day, the 218 majority is the threshold point. It's the narrowest majority in decades for the speaker, and we'll see what happens. But it looks like the House, at least the Democratic side, is in a unified position, at least for the foreseeable future. On the Republican side, based on what we've seen in the insurrection and just generally speaking, the continuing sort of tension between what's left of the moderates in the Republican side of the column and the Trump voters and what have you, the Republican Party makes the Castor-Jammer kids right now look well behaved. I mean, it is really it's a food fight on the Republican side. So for the foreseeable future, Speaker Pelosi has the gavel and has control, notwithstanding the divisions, quiet at times, sometimes loud, between the progressives, the moderates, and the blue dog side of the Democratic column. As far as the Senate is concerned, you know that we have a 50-50 Senate, with the Georgia Senate races being decided in favor of the Democrats. Currently, it remains in Republican control, and that's just a function of, shall we call it, ministerial delivery of certification of the votes. In Georgia, the deadline for the state to certify is January 22nd. And at least what we can divine from reading the papers and also talking to some of the Senator Harris, Vice President-elect Harris's staff, is that it looks like she's going to hold her seat close to Inauguration Day just to maintain control of the Senate with respect to votes. As I understand it, the governor's appointment or selection of the Secretary of State requires some paperwork, and that's part of the challenge of getting it to the Senate. But I would assume, give or take a few days, by January 24th, 25th, we'll have a Democratic controlled Senate. Going forward on the procedures of the House and Senate for the next year, a couple of very important changes were made in the House that have a relevance to East Bay MUD. First of all, earmarks are going to return in some format. The rule that governed Congress last year had explicit prohibition on earmarks. This year, the rule has no reference at all to earmarks, and our conversations with staff on the Hill suggests that the reason that it's silent is it gives committee chairs and the leadership the discretionary authority to determine in the course of the coming year how they want to implement earmarks. But we do believe that the opportunity to earmark projects, or maybe call it congressionally directed spending for projects, is alive and returning to the way Congress does work. In the Senate,
Eric, can I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee, she's going to play a critical role because of her position. Is she not in the House side?
Yeah, I was going to get to that in a second, Director Coleman.
Sorry.
But you're absolutely right. Barbara Lee not only is a senior member of the Appropriations Committee, but is we'll call it in the inner circle with Speaker Pelosi on the leadership rung, and I'll mention that in a second. The other thing I want to mention in the context of COVID and climate change, the rule that was adopted last week governing the House operations exempts from the budget process in the sense of spending levels and caps and finding offsets for new spending for new programs, exempts COVID activities and climate change. Those are two huge, call it discretionary spending activities, because given the way climate change is and the way the president-elect's Build Back Better plan is designed, climate change could be, you could call it anything you want, from infrastructure to addressing unmet needs in rural and urban communities. So the process is in play, or has been put into place, to allow for in big, bold initiatives on the spending front for both COVID and climate change in the months ahead. So that's sort of a quick summary on the House side. And the Senate, as the Senate
Eric,
is.
let me ask, maybe you just answered it when you said on the House side. I find that pretty amazing. COVID, I understand that they could get change the rules on that, but for climate change, it seems like there's still so much turmoil over that issue that it would be a lot harder.
Yeah, so the only thing I can say is it's sort of, if you were looking to say, well, give me an indication that you think climate change is going to happen as far as legislative responses, I would say, hey, they took the pay-go off climate change policies or climate change spending on the appropriations bill, so that in theory, you could just legislate, say, a new climate change program to deal with sea level rise. And you wouldn't have, even you'd still have to score it, and you say, okay, it's $100 million a year over 5 years. But you wouldn't have to find $500 million to offset that new spending. And I think that's just an indication that finally, I think the Democratic majority has decided the gloves are coming off. We're going to figure out a way to use the process and get what we want after 4 years of Republican efforts to do otherwise.
So is that I might have missed it, but so that's under reconciliation, they can do that?
Ultimately, that's where you get to. That's right.
Wow.
So
that's
so
big.
How much of this can the Democrats do with existing precedent? And does any of this determined based on a ruling of the parliamentarian in the Senate, or is this already established by opinion of the parliamentarian as it currently is?
So in the Senate, they have their own set of rules. So you're correct. So in the Senate, it's more norms as well as some rules. And on the budget front, they are rules. So the Senate, you're going to have this collision. But remember, we now have Democratic control of the Senate. So depending on how the Senate, when Chuck Schumer takes over as Senate Majority Leader and they decide on what the rules of the Senate are going to be, then at that point, because it's a majority vote on the rule, at that point, game over. So they could, in theory, say we're going to follow the same game plan as the House, and we're going to exempt from pay-go climate change, for example, as the House has. And in fact, Schumer, a couple hours ago, in one of the journals that we get, I think it was Politico, is quoted as saying, we are going bold on climate change. Make no mistake. Does that answer your question?
It does. There's a lot of blogs written about a lot of this stuff. I think that sums it up.
Okay. So basically, for going forward, the rules essentially help to promote policies as well as individual activities that Marlene will talk about on the priorities for East Bay MUD going forward. At least the opportunities are there that haven't been there for the last several years. As far as leadership, and getting to Director Coleman's question about Barbara Lee, basically the leadership remains unchanged. Senator Feinstein, though, will become a senior appropriator in the majority, so she will have control over spending decisions, most notably water resources, water supply. She sits on the EPA spending subcommittee also. So when you think about agencies that she can have an effect on budget-wise, project-wise, EPA, I mean, everything is under her. She can do everything she wants on any issue, but her subcommittees of jurisdiction, Corps of Engineers, Bureau of Reclamation, Department of the Interior, EPA, housing, things of that sort are really within her bailiwick, if you will. Senator to be Padilla, we don't know yet where he's going to end up. My fervent hope is that he ends up on the Environment and Public Works Committee to restore California's representation on this key committee, because we lost representation when Vice President-elect Harris went over to the Judiciary Committee when she first came to Congress. Barbara Lee, senior appropriator, but also important to note is a co-chair along with Eric Swalwell from Dublin of the Speaker's Domestic Policy Steering Committee, or Democratic Steering Committee, excuse me. And that is the committee that essentially is the gatekeeper for committee appointments and agenda setting for the speaker. So in that role, Barbara Lee, coupled with her senior appropriations role, and have a major presence in the priorities that the district cares about. Those two members will be very important. Representative DeSaulnier, thankfully, is healthy and has returned to work in I will say, in a robust manner. As he said, the doctors were literally dumbfounded that he walked out of the hospital. That's how serious his illness was. He's back in true fighting form. As he said, I've gained my 35 pounds back and I'm ready to go. He is a senior member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, jurisdiction over wastewater issues. It'll be involved in climate change issues as it relates to the wastewater side of the column and Superfund and any manner of transportation related issues. And then, of course, our honorary member, I like to say, Representative Huffman. And Representative Huffman will be continuing to be a leading voice on the House Committee on Natural Resources as the chair of the Subcommittee of Jurisdictions on all things important to East Bay MUD related to fisheries, water supply, equity in getting water to the people that need it. He'll be there. And I would also note that he's sort of climbing the rungs of the ladder on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee also. And so from a sort of who do we have in our delegation as an honorary member, he's a very powerful guy. And he, quite frankly, he loves what you guys do. So it's just really, in a very bleak period of time right now, this is really good news of what we're looking at going forward. I think if I could, I'd like to go over quickly on what we see happening on the priorities for the Congress and by reference, the incoming administration. First of all, it's I like to say the first 100 days are going to feel like a full presidential term is our feeling. The priority truly is going to be on COVID, then COVID, then COVID, and then some economic stimulus sort of wrapped into COVID. When we think about economic stimulus and COVID, expect state and local governmental assistance. That failed to be included in this package that Marlene referenced. Basically, they ran out of time and money to do it, and a promise by the president-elect to address this issue later. At this stage, the number of assistance could range from anywhere from $500 to $900 billion for state and local government assistance if we use as our reference point what was earlier floated by Speaker Pelosi. I fully expect that ratepayer assistance that Marlene mentioned earlier will be expanded, or at least perhaps a little bit more money supplementing what they gave in the $638 million in this recently enacted package. And so when this happens, we are hoping, based on news reports, that the actual COVID relief package outlines will start leaking on Thursday of this week. And that will be a signal to the stakeholders out there, whether it's public or private sector, healthcare, wastewater, water, what have you, to start lobbying members to get this passed as quickly as possible. And then I think, from an economic stimulus, I do believe you're going to see additional checks in the mail to folks, although perhaps streamlined and restricted to folks that the Congress believes are in need more so than just doing a blanket. If you make $75,000 or less, or $194,000 as a couple less, you get money. I think they might do some fine tuning there. But I think that's the economic stimulus at the outset, along with unemployment, rental assistance, and what have you. So that's where we are, I think, in the next let's call it the next 2 months. And then I think from going forward position into March, April, May, we're going to see hearings in both the House and Senate on infrastructure. And I would emphasize at this point that in the past, when I've spoken to you about infrastructure, I've been really optimistic, and then I've had to come back with my tail between my legs to explain why it didn't happen. And at the end of the day, this time, water is right up there with roads, airports, ports and harbors. When we talk about infrastructure, the President-elect's Build Back Better plan identifies water and wastewater. We saw in the House passed Moving Forward Act last year, which was the first effort at $1.5 trillion in infrastructure assistance, 60 billion for wastewater and water needs under the State Revolving Loan Fund program, and just a host of tens of millions of dollars for other activities related to water resources, like water recycling and what have you. And so looking forward, well, we're not going to see the Green New Deal in total. We're going to see elements of it grafted into, I think, a larger infrastructure package. And as a starting point, just so from a sort of alternative energies point of view, there is a $40 billion authorization sitting within the Department of Energy right now. And we expect that the President-elect will use that existing authorization to pile in some money to basically jumpstart alternative energy, including the energy water nexus technology adoption in the coming months. So that's all good. And then from a, I want to just say very quickly on the environmental justice end of things, it's our sense that at the end of the day, environmental justice is such a big issue in the President-elect's Build Back Better plan that I think you have to look at it as something that will infuse all the overall policies, whether it's infrastructure or voting rights or whatever. I think that's where you're going to see a lot of the response in Congress and the administration to sort of integrate, if you will, that issue into the larger picture of directing federal resources to rebuild the nation and to create better jobs for folks. And then finally, on the resiliency front in general, because I say climate change is one thing, which is, greenhouse gas emissions and everything else, reductions wise, but resiliency is playing a greater role when it comes to the water sector and trying to figure out ways to do things smarter to protect against sea level rise, droughts, you name it, anything that impacts the physical footprint of water and wastewater needs and infrastructure. I think you'll see a lot of money poured into that. And I think one of the areas that you're going to see a huge commitment to is smart water technologies. And so things like AMI metering could, because of the benefit of managing your water supply with greater knowledge, I think we could see grants being made available for that kind of activity, which conceivably would be available for somebody like EBMUD to pursue. And so that's one example of how resiliency will play. And then I do want to point out a couple of other quick items. One is Buy America. I think you're going to see as any part of a huge infrastructure package or a little infrastructure package, imposition of broader Buy America mandates. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm against or for it in the way my tone might be seen or heard, but I'm suggesting to you that right now, the only thing that really impacts your capital side of the budget when it comes to federal assistance is American iron and steel, that you have to use American iron and steel if you use federal resources. Going forward, you're looking at the potential, and I emphasize the potential, that manufactured goods or products would be subject to Buy American mandates also. So that would capture, say, pumps, chemicals, perhaps, anything and everything. So I just point that out as one of the sort of elements of any kind of new infrastructure policy, that it would go along for a ride on infrastructure. And then lastly, PFAS. I use PFAS as a label because contaminants or constituents of emerging concern are going to take a bigger place in the whole issue of how do we deal with public health and protection of the drinking water supply. So I think you have to look at that. And then very quickly, and I'll wrap up, from a Biden perspective, everything that I've just talked about from a legislative perspective, I think you can bank on the fact that the Biden folks, their efforts are going to just mirror what the House and the Senate would like to do under Democratic control. And I think you're going to see a very close working relationship between the two, or the two branches, if you will. I don't think you're going to see, there isn't going to be much daylight between the two of them when they move the big initiatives forward. And then probably the last thing I would talk about before I turn it over to Marlene is what happens in the first 24 hours of a Biden administration, notwithstanding what's happened in the last week. And the hope is that we don't see a repetition of it next week. I think you're going to see a whole host of environmental orders that reverse many of the Trump mandates, if you will, or executive orders. Waters of the United States rulemaking, probably a directive for the Justice Department and EPA to review the rule and figure out what you can do to turn it back. I think by a sort of a label or emblematically, the reversal of the president's executive order on a bar on diversity training, with federal monies. And then I think from a sort of long-term proposition, the Trump administration's requirement that if you have a new regulation, you have to kick out 2 existing regulations. And that will be clearly probably one of the first things from an environmental side that you'll see in an executive order overturning that mandate. And then finally, just to sort of sum up, probably expect to see a overall statement from the White House to the Justice Department to review all pending legal cases, whether it's DACA or environmental enforcement, just a total review and where the administration should be with respect to pursuing any kind of litigation or legal actions. So with that, President Lenny, I'll conclude my remarks. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Marlene.
Thank you, Eric. Always excellent to, I always look forward to your first of the year crystal ball as well evaluation of things. It's always a little bit different from someone in DC than those of us who are outside the DC bubble, which we're glad to be right now.
Well,
Any questions from anyone?
We addressed the 5 initiatives in Federal Affairs Committee today, and we took an action to support the 5 initiatives. So with that, I'll move the item.
I will second.
All right, Director Coleman made a motion. Director Young seconded for the 2021 recommendations for federal initiatives. Any further discussion on those?
I just want to say it's really going to be nice to actually have some federal initiatives happening. Fingers crossed.
And maybe some
baby steps, probably baby steps, but you know.
And maybe some infrastructure money too.
So we'll have a roll call vote.
Ready. Directors Coleman?
Yes.
Bill Patterson was waving his hand. I don't think he realizes he's on mute.
Hold on, let me
Who
ask
would
him
you-
to unmute.
I really just wanted to pass on to Eric that I think you've done an admirable job under adverse conditions in DC, and now having a pretty good runway and an opportunity to have a majority folk for the right thing, that this will be a good year for you. You've been so helpful to us in the past, but as I repeat, I'm hoping this will be a better time to get a lot of our initiatives, some in change and some going forward. And the job you've done working with our representative here, Marlene, is admirable. And I want to call attention to it because that's part of what made us tick over a rough period of time. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Director Patterson.
Right. Ready for the roll call vote on the federal initiatives for 2021. Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes,
Young,
Yep.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, thank you. Eric, I have one other question that just keeps bothering me. I'm not sure you have any particular insight on it, but I'd be interested to hear it as well. Senator McConnell has also, is famous for declaring that he's going to do everything he can to stop anything that a Democratic president might put forward. How does that
yeah.
look as you look down the line in terms of getting some of these things done and passed?
So I guess I think the answer can be sort of stated this way. First, better to have the gavel, so to speak, than not, even if it's a 51 vote majority, right? But I think, yes, I mean, if we didn't take the Senate back, it would have been a definite terrible situation of gridlock. But I think given the fact that you've got a number of Republicans now in the Senate, not a huge number, but enough, the Mitt Romneys, the Susan Collins, the Ben Sasses, that you've got enough Republican members that could at least begin to force compromise, much like what we saw with the COVID relief package, that, maybe there's a little bit of hope that you could get beyond the Mitch McConnell obstruction behavior. But I think we're in a much better place. I hear what he said about stopping these things, but I think in some respects it's going to be very hard for him to resist infrastructure. It's going to be hard for him to resist public health after COVID, to restructure things. But we'll see. But I'm optimistic that something will get done. But I'm a realist. I do agree with you that it's a slim margin, but better to have the majority.
And I take it that Vice President Harris has to actually be physically in the Senate to make these votes. So she'll be spending time there, maybe can't roll office there or something.
So I will say this, fully aware that we are being recorded for posterity's sake. It's every president's dream. He knows where his vice president is. And all seriousness, yes.
And this vice president will have something clear to do.
Yeah, that's right.
I think the nice thing is she's working on behalf of a guy who was in that job before, right? And he knows what it's like to be part of the team as opposed to being left on the side of the road, say like an LBJ under John Kennedy. President Lenny, could I just sort of wave my hand to Clifford and say, hi, Clifford. I didn't get to say hello to him. Thank you.
That's great.
The only thing I'll just throw in that I hope that we see more of you, not just the annual report, but since things might be happening, as much as we love hearing from Marlene, I think your unique perspective from the Hill is, very valuable. So,
Especially
kind of you.
Our use of Zoom.
Yeah.
For the foreseeable future here, near future, that would be great. I agree.
Thank you very much. Although I much more prefer to be out in front of you for that Bay Area attitude, if anything.
All right, thank you. Marlene, you have anything else?
Thank you for approving the initiatives, and I think we'll be talking quite a lot this year.
All right, thank you very much. We are on to number 18, consider adjusting Board of Directors monthly compensation. Clifford, you might be on mute. I was thinking you might introduce.
I don't have much to add. Maybe just get some feedback from the board on, right now, we're proposing what staff got, which is 3%, which is $41 a month.
All right, board discussion.
Yeah.
I'm saying, Marguerite.
I believe that we are in a time when I've always voted for our raises, at least I think I have. But this year I'm thinking that we don't take it. So many of our customers are struggling, and we are not out of the woods ourselves. And while, you know, the collective of $280 a month isn't really going to, you know, break anybody's bank. I just think it's, I will be voting against any kind of raise for us this year. So that's where I'm coming.
I agree.
I wholeheartedly agree with Marguerite. It's the wrong message at the wrong time.
I agree.
All right,
We
anybody
need a motion to say.
I agree.
So
Why
I'll
don't we
make the
table
motion that we table, is tabling the right thing? I guess if we don't consider it, it doesn't need to get voted on. I
Right.
motion to table.
What,
Second.
So let me ask, why wouldn't, I guess table wouldn't even bring it up, but it seems like, yeah, I guess wouldn't make a motion to vote against it. You'd only.
You could vote no on it and make it have a stronger statement.
Somebody could make a motion.
Yeah, that's the only thing
For
is
the purposes,
if we want a strong motion or, you know.
well, somebody can make a motion in favor of it and second it, and then we can have a vote and see what happens.
We don't have to go through all of that.
Yeah, I don't think that's,
No.
if we think everybody votes no, then I think tabling it is, and taking a roll call on tabling it is as potent as.
excuse me, the board can come to consensus that you not even consider it, and so the minutes would read that the board, there was a consensus by the board to not take action on the board's compensation for 2021.
Okay. Do we have to take a roll call to have consensus, Risha?
Each one of you kind of stated, I documented that Directors Young, Coleman, and Mellon agreed that it was not the right message to send. And so if you want to state that for the record, then I will add that in the minutes.
Sure.
I agree that we should take no action.
Yeah. And
And Lisa's there
Go ahead,
too,
Bill.
and Bill. Good.
Go ahead, Bill.
We all agreed.
Okay.
I think Bill wanted to say something though. I'm seeing a
so
hand.
I just wanted to point out that Lisa was part of the saying no as well. That's what made it majority, made it not necessary.
All right, so we're recording that there is consensus that everybody is a thumbs down on this proposal
Right.
this year. And I'll spare everyone my speech for why I usually am supportive of this. But I totally agree that this year is a special year that way, and that this would be an important thing not to bring to the board. All right, on to the next item. General Manager's report.
Yeah, we have a number of items. I asked that each of the speakers, just given how long this board meeting has gone, to be quick and deliberate with their presentations. That said, you know it's the start of the new year when you get your first water supply update. Last year, we know that it was below average precipitation, and unfortunately, this year is starting out slow. Dave Briggs, Director of Operations and Maintenance, will make the presentation.
Hello, President Linney. Good afternoon, Happy New Year, and hello, outgoing President Young and members of the board. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, it is that time of year for the first look at our water supply, and as we do customarily, we'll take a look back at how the last water year ended before we get into the latest data for this year, as well as providing you some statewide context, and then leaving you with some forecast information about possible ways that the year could end up. So let's get into it here. And Janetta, do you want me to control the slides from the podium? Oh, thank you. Thought I got it. There, now you can see me. Okay, so I am in control. Is that, looks like I am. Okay, so thank you. Okay, so last year, water year 2020 ended on September 30th, and statistically, as we're showing here in slide 3, our precipitation in the watershed upcountry, we got 33.4 inches of precipitation. This is an average of our 4-station index, so it's a combination of rain and snow from elevations 4,000 to 8,000, about 70% of average. The snow water content of our snowpack at its highest reached 23.8 inches. This was also about 70% of average. And the meanwhile, locally, we only got 12.1 inches of rain locally, which we had to look at this morning because I wasn't sure. This is the second lowest precipitation we've measured locally in the 70 or 80 years or so we've been taking records, only behind less precipitation in 1976. So quite a lot, or quite a little bit of precipitation locally last year. Of course, most of our water doesn't come locally, but still it affects demand and irrigation as well locally, but not a good year locally for sure. Upcountry, the runoff produced 420,000 acre feet of runoff. That puts it in the dry category. And if you look at compare it to the average of 740,000 acre feet, quite below, significantly below our average runoff for the McElmy watershed. But partly with the robust year we had in 2019, water year 2019, which was significantly wet, far above average, far above normal, we rolled into water year 2020 in very good shape, and we rolled out of water year 2020 in reasonably good shape with our carryover storage entering water year 21 at 576,000 acre feet. So not great, but certainly not bad either. So let's get into where we are now, and we'll start with water production, which is shown here on slide 5. The red line is our water production about halfway through the year, and we're tracking similar to last year, which is shown in green, and the top line there in purplish blue is an average of our highest water production from 15, 16 years ago or so. And you can see we're still below that peak for sure, and our water production is similar to last year. I will say, though, it's hard to discern from these two lines, but where we are headed right now, and our forecasts tend to be pretty accurate on this, we're forecasting about 170 MGD of average production for the year. That's about 2 or 3% higher than last year. And it's consistent with our budget projections and assumptions built into the budget as well. So we're above last year. We expect to, barring something remarkable happening, we should end up with higher production and sales compared to last year. Okay, so there's only so many ways I can make this look good. But here we have the precipitation upcountry as we start the water year in 2021. And you can see we've had many marginal months far below average so far in the upper watershed. November was below, December was below half of what we should normally see on average. And January, we've had anything but a fast start to the new calendar year with January barely or not even measuring an inch upcountry. So we're at 42% of average right now. It is early. I will tell you that the forecast for the next 7-10 days or so doesn't show much. The models are sort of disagreeing further out, but January right now is not looking great, but maybe we'll see some type of shift happen in the latter part of the month. Locally, similar story, but slightly worse. We're only 25% of average so far. Very little rain so far here locally. The snowpack, so this is a measurement taken at 8,000 feet, give or take, up in the upper watershed. So this is a single point. The snowpack actually doesn't look that bad. So near 8,000 feet, there is snow. We're about, as you'll see in the next slide, about 75% of average. The depth this year is shown in red. Compare that to the orange dash line, which is the long-term average. And then several other lines here are shown here as well. For reference, recent years as well, very wet year in 2017, very dry year, and that's green, very dry year shown in blue in 2015, and then last year in black shown in 2020. So one or two good storms, as you know, will punch this snowpack above average or keep it at average. So we'll watch this and see how it goes, but it is early, but we are tracking behind so far. And then, as I just mentioned, just to give you some of those numbers, we're 75% of average in terms of depth, and also 75% of average in terms of water content in the upper part of the watershed right now. Storage, as I mentioned, is good, not great, not bad. We're at just under 566,000 acre feet for the entire system as we start this water year. That is about average, believe it or not, because the average does take into account very wet and very dry years. So we did have a dry year last year, but that was preceded by a very wet year. So all in all, our storage is about average, but we don't really have much room for error at this point if we go through another dry year. Just for reference, we're passing minimum flows through our upcountry dams right now, and we're still generating a few megawatts, but we're all at minimum release up there right now, consistent with our environmental obligations. This graphic comes to us courtesy of the Center for Western Water and Water Extremes. Very colorful, very vibrant, and what the graphic is communicating here is with the contours is the likelihood that various parts of the western United States will reach a normal precipitation water year. And you can see here that just about everything below 45 degrees latitude is a relatively low probability of reaching average. Only in the upper parts of the United States are we approaching the likelihood of reaching an average water year. So this is a long-term look through the next few months. It uses a different set of models. They're not perfect, but it is a good indicator of what we likely could see. So not a lot of reasons to think we're going to have a very wet year this year, but there is still a chance. Also point out that parts of Northern California are even in a lighter color if you look carefully, and that's not necessarily relevant to East Bay Mud. Our watershed is not in the Northern California area, but much of the state, Central Valley Project and State Water Project water comes from up there, so that could not be a good sign for statewide supply as we move forward, but we will see. And then the last slide here, as I mentioned, taking that point showing here in mid-January, where we have our storage, our total system storage is about 565,000 acre feet. And you can see as we project forward to the end of the water year, there's a wide range of things that could happen from here. If we stay very dry, which is what that red line is showing, if we have a dry hydrology, we will track to 410,000 acre feet by the end of the water year. That would put us into a supplemental supply situation, possibly a rationing situation. The other two lines, which are entirely possible, the green, which is a median hydrology, and a blue, which is a wet hydrology, are completely possible at this point, and we could certainly end up normal or even normal carryover storage, or even completely full. So it's very early, as we always try to mention and keep that in mind. This time of year, it is very early, and there's a wide range of outcomes that are still ahead of us, and we'll come back regularly and keep the board informed of where we are, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I can't see everyone here, so go ahead and speak up if you have a question. Oh, there we go. All right, thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Got it.
Thank you, Dave. Next item, so as part of the district declared COVID emergency, I have the authority to enter into emergency contracts to support our response without bids or notice. Our policy does require that I report a summary of those contracts executed to the board. This month, we entered into 2 contracts, one with WorkCare to provide temporary COVID-19 testing, and Axiom Medical Consulting to help with our contact tracing. I can answer any questions that you might have. Okay, seeing none. Next up, I know you're hearing a lot about COVID from Eric and from Dave and from other speakers. There's a lot going on. ICU rates in the Bay Area are now at 0.7%. There is some glimmer of hope with the vaccines, but the rollout is pretty slow. Dave Briggs will provide a brief update on our COVID response.
Again? All right, we'll transition to this brief presentation. Thank you, Janetta. I'll just, okay, great, thank you. And do I have control? Oh, great, that'll work. Okay, good afternoon again. So the Bay Area has been under the regional stay-at-home order for about a month now. That was a voluntary decision when the governor and state of California and the state health department issued that order, because back then the ICU rate in the Bay Area was well above 15%. And as Clifford just mentioned, I think the latest number was, what, 0.7, below 1 at this point, which is startling. There is no anticipated date of coming out of the regional stay-at-home order. It's indefinite at this point. That being said, we are not seeing any significant impacts on district operations. Of course, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, adapting and changing how we do things to make this make everything run smoothly. So it's not to say there's no impacts, but we are finding a way to get it done. With respect to a testing program here on slide 3, yesterday on Monday we initiated an employee testing program for those employees who are regularly in close contact with other employees, and the intent of the program is to test employees to improve safety, reduce risks for any type of employee-to-employee transmission that could be possible. So that's the intent of the program, that's the object of the program, and that's what it's geared for. About 400 employees are being tested or will be tested as part of this program. Most of them are field employees in maintenance and construction, and we have enlisted the support of a contractor, a medical services contractor, to help us administer these tests because that is their line of work and not our line of work. Employees are tested once a week, and we hope to do this for about 4 weeks while the pandemic is in such an extreme situation right now. We will look at this again after 4 weeks and adapt or change. And if things improve, we may or may not need to continue the program. And as Clifford mentioned, we executed this program under the authority granted in the GM's, in the board's emergency declaration back in March. So the state vaccination plan, which I know the board is familiar with, the vaccination plan from the state is prioritized based on health risks and exposure risks. There's all sorts of terminology the state has invented with phases and tiers to try to work through this. Long story short, as the board is aware of, most counties are vaccinating phase 1A right now, which consists of healthcare workers and long-term care residents. Some counties, including our upcountry counties, are having conversations already about beginning phase 1B, where law enforcement, emergency responders, and other vulnerable populations or at-risk populations, including teachers, would be pulled into the next round of vaccinations. We have already heard that our rangers upcountry have been asked to be prepared to be vaccinated under the phase 1B group upcountry. So that was good news. The bulk of our employees, certainly our operators and water and wastewater, would be included in the 1C category. The slide says possibly in February, but I think that's probably looking more and more like March based on the state's progress so far. I think Clifford or others mentioned that we've had 2 million doses received in the state of California. 600,000 or so have been administered. The governor put a stretch objective out there a few days ago to try to get 1 million people vaccinated by the weekend or something, which may or may not happen, but it's good to see that the governor is marshaling all the state resources to hopefully get the vaccination rate greatly increased here in the next few days with enough attention focused on it. The district has its own plan, which of course is dependent on what the state and local plans come up with. Right now, our program is not mandatory, but we will do everything we can to encourage and facilitate vaccinations, allowing employees to get vaccinated on district time at no cost. We are asking employees to report their status to HR in a confidential way so we can keep track in general of how much of the workforce has been vaccinated. And we don't anticipate hosting a vaccination facility, although that's a very dynamic world as well. But right now, we're not anticipating hosting any vaccination facilities. Many other facilities, including healthcare facilities, will be used, but certainly other sites will be enlisted for the population to be vaccinated quickly. Other details that I think we've already covered. So our operators and our field employees will likely be included in Phase 1C. We are trying to prioritize our group. So when we do get the phone call from the county that it is our turn, that we're ready and we're not caught flat-footed. So we want to have whatever that phone call, we don't know, but if that phone call comes and it's send 500 people or 800 people, whatever that number is, or send them all, we're ready to do that so we can react immediately. So we're working on that behind the scenes, and we'll have that daylighted shortly. Again, the timing is still unknown, probably looking like March now for our field employees and operators. And on a separate track, of course, if employees are old enough, independent of where they may work at the district or what their job might be, older residents, county residents, et cetera, can be vaccinated faster if they're old enough. So just wrapping up here with the last two slides, slide 7 here. We haven't seen a big impact on our district operations so far from the stay-at-home mandate and the other health orders. That hasn't changed. We've increased the number of resources that we've applied to our contact tracing and administering the COVID-related issues that come up with the workforce. We have a contractor on board now to support us with contact tracing, which we hope will greatly help our resources there. To date, we have 53 actually now employee positives through, what's today, January 12th, including 11 contractors. 44 of the 52, so presumably, I don't know if that's 45 now, but 44 of the 52 employees who tested positive have returned to work as of January 5th. The remaining employees are at home, still in isolation. None of those employees are hospitalized. We had 22 positives in the month of December, so that was most definitely an uptick. 32 employees as of last week are quarantining, but many of those employees are not using any type of leave because many of them are telecommuting, and that might help you interpret this last set of graphics here on the last slide, where we show here the top graphic represents the number of hours on average per day divided up by pay period of how much COVID-related leave is being taken by employees. And you certainly see the uptick as we rolled into December and started to absorb that Thanksgiving surge. So the last pay period of data we have went through December 20th. I suspect the pay period that ended January 3rd will be very similar, if not slightly higher. And that translates to about, if you look at the magnitude of that blue bar on the right, in December, that the pay period that ended December 20th, what that means is that roughly 7 employees, about 56 hours a day, so that's about 7 FTE, about 7 employees are not at work, not making a contribution because of for some COVID-related reason. And that is a much smaller number than the quarantine number because some of those quarantine employees are just telecommuting if they can. The bottom graphic shows the positives by month, and we have now 6 in the month of January, not 5, but that 5 is through January 7th. I hope I've given you an adequate update, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Marguerite.
Just one question on I've been impressed by the hours of leave associated with COVID And I'm just wondering whether, impressed in a good way, even though having 6 or 7 people out is, seems small still in an organization of our size. And I'm just wondering whether we've tracked, do we have information from other utilities, other similar sized organizations? I mean, do we, are we,
Yeah,
where are we in sort of comparison to everyone else in terms of impact of it?
Director Young, I think in my conversations with ACWD, Contra Costa, and San Francisco, I can't remember how LADWP is doing, but Clifford might. But in my conversation with other Bay Area utilities, prorated, obviously, we're bigger than ACWD, we're bigger than CCWD, so prorated, the stories are very similar. They're not having operational problems. They are having proportionate, similar people contract the virus. They're not having massive outbreaks at their work sites. They're adapting. And I think the story is very similar.
Yeah, I would echo that, just speaking with other agencies. But Southern California, they're certainly seeing higher rates than we're seeing in the Bay Area.
Right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Next up, we continue to make a lot of progress in our racial equity and justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan projects. And Derry Moten will provide the update.
Good afternoon, board members. We'll be brief with the information here. To begin with, we will focus on covering control here real quickly.
We're having a hard time hearing you, Derry.
I'm sorry, is that better?
Not really.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so right now, hear me now.
Kind of in and out a little bit. Give it a try some more. Let's see.
I'm making one more adjustment here.
Yes, that's coming through better, Derry.
Okay, great. Okay, so our agenda here is we want to give you kind of a brief update on how we're progressing with the projects. Most significantly, where we are in terms of the development of the diversity inclusion strategic plan, give you our schedule, and then next steps that we have going on here. So, I'm sorry, I don't have control.
But we can hear you well.
Okay,
Derry, you've been given control. Can you accept it, or Robin can move through the slides for you as well?
Okay.
Try clicking into the presentation and then trying to navigate.
Okay, great. Okay, so on our 4 strategies that we have, are we moving forward with in our racial equity and justice project? Strategy 1 and 6 have continued to move forward. In both cases, we are working with our internal staff on taking tangible actions. We've been developing training specifically to work with affinity groups and affinity group leaders and district advocates to strengthen their, build their capacity for doing additional listening sessions with their teams. In strategy 6, we have been working on the development plans and been laying out kind of general metrics for how we want to advance the protocols for dealing with racism from customers. In both cases, again, a lot of progress has been made in both groups. Both groups have made their presentations to the steering committees and made modifications, and we are really closing in on kind of final programming right now. For strategy 7 and 8, which deal with really security issues, we have kind of an initial plan for both strategies to be presented to the steering committee later this month. In both cases, in addition to the formal actions that are being proposed, ongoing conversations have been had with our law enforcement partners regarding specifically issues around how they're making modifications to their workforces, specifically around the issues of excessive force, and also how they're dealing with police reform on whole. For our development of the diversity inclusion strategic plan, the process that we're using for this has included the core team and the SMT going through 3 phases of training, or 3 courses in phase 2 of their training. We have completed course 1, all members. The core team and select members of the SMT have completed course 2, which is about evaluating, understanding, identifying opportunities to implement racial equity in our context. And course number 3, which is developing a racial equity plan, is actually a workshop that is designed to take us through some work specifically looking at 6 potential pilot projects, which will guide us into key areas that will become part of our strategy to move forward with diversity, equity, and inclusion here at the district. So that will begin at the end of January and spill over into February. The pilot projects that we're looking at working with will continue through February and lead us to documentation of things specifically for this strategic plan. So those 6 pilot projects were developed from outcomes that the core team identified during course number 2 in the discussion around understanding both the impacts of systemic racism and looking overall at equity issues locally in our context. The issues that came up was, number 1, how do we take a look at our capital investments and infrastructure and look at ways that we can enhance equity in what the implementation of those projects look like in our local communities. Number 2 was around community engagement in the sense of looking at practical things that happen from day to day in our communities that represent potential inequities that we can be focused on. Number 3 was looking at the areas of contracts and procurement. Are there opportunities for us to continue to enhance our existing programming around contract equity? Number 3 is dealing with customer fines and fees, which we have been doing good work on in terms of no shutoffs, but looking further at that and looking at some of those impacts and what that means for us long-term. Number 5 then is looking at our hiring and recruitment practices, which is work that we initially began with some of our values work and organizational improvement work. We'll be taking some of the content that was prepared by the values teams on this area and continue to bring this together for the group as the group looks at this pilot project here. And finally, aligned with hiring and recruitment is the issue of promotion and retention, which has to do with really how we implement not just our diversity strategies, but looking closer at how we actually are looking at inclusion strategies organizationally. So these are the 6 outcomes, the 6 pilot projects that we're looking at as part of the process here. So in terms of schedule, again, we're continuing to make good progress on all the areas. On phase 3, which we're kind of entering into now, which is looking at how we are getting data back from the Winters Group. We're expecting the Winters Group to provide for us their full feedback on their assessment of our existing policies, procedures, and the data collected from the assessments that they worked on for us, which we provided sometime between now and our February meeting. That data will then be integrated into looking at how those will align with the 6 pilot projects that we'll be working with coming up here. And so our goal for completing the strategic plan is working on the data between January and March, and hopefully having a full plan in place in April. So our next steps are, number 1, continue implementing the recommendations from the strategies that are active for strategies 1, 6, 7, and 8. Next is also participating in the 3rd racial equity course for the core team and the senior management team. And again, the selecting the pilot projects which have been selected, but then looking at how will we look at implementing some of those pilot projects And the goal of the pilot projects will be specifically around data collection that will lead us to then being able to take long-term actions. The Winters Group will be providing the preliminary findings of their internal assessment, and we've been waiting for that data. The Winters Group was actually closed during the month of December, so we're eagerly looking for that data to come back from them. Staff will also, in the month of February at our first board meeting, will present a structure for a proposed new Office of Diversity, Equity, and Development. This would be a restructuring of our current Diversity Inclusion Office and into a format that we believe will support the work that we're doing overall. And then we'll continue to provide updates and seek direction from the board as we advance and move forward. So at this point, I want to open up for any questions.
All right, any questions from board members? All right, I don't see any right now. Derry, thank you for that presentation and keeping this moving along. Look forward to hearing more about it.
Thank you all for your support.
Thank you, Derry. I have three more very quick items. The first, attached to your board packet, is the 6-month summary and 6-month forecast for board committees and workshops. The themes that you've been hearing in the last 6 months and are going to continue to hear are sustainability and resilience and water affordability and accessibility. Sustainability and resilience are important in everything that we do. Looking forward for the next 6 months, we have a lot of activities going on. At the next board meeting, we'll share with you our climate action plan, as well as hold the first of up to 3 budget workshops. In February, we have our Customer Assistance Program workshop and our long-term water supply workshop. For the CAP workshop, we're going to talk about our no water shutoff activities and plan, progress on our CAP program, as well as ideas to address water availability for the homeless. And then also, we've been working on a strategic communications plan, and we'll share that plan with you this spring as well. Next in your packet is the annual reports from our interdepartmental committees. We have 8 standing committees, and per our procedure, those committees report their activities to me and the board. And finally, attached is the December monthly report. And with that, I can answer any questions about those 3 items.
I don't see any hands. So I think we're good with that. We will move now to reports and director comments. Committee reports. John, you want to give a report on the Legislative Human Resources?
Thank you. I had to unmute myself here. We dealt with a number of the items. We had all 3 members of the committee in attendance today, and as a result, we pushed forward the federal initiative, which was passed, and we had a good report from Marlene on what's happening on the state, and nothing else to report. It's all been dealt with some way or another today.
All right. And on the planning committee, we also had full attendance, spoke about 3 items. One first was a briefing update on the wet weather consent decree implementation update. Recommend everyone be sure to take a look at that as we move along. Basic report is in our 3 areas. We are having challenges still in reaching them all, but one particularly important point, Isabel, that we may miss. We may want to be able to make adjustments in 2022 when we hit our interim check-in, if you will, for the consent decree. We heard a very exciting proposal that the committee supports unanimously for the Richmond salmon net pen proposal. This is a proposal to release the small salmon from our fisheries in addition to the places that they're released right now in the Richmond salmon, Richmond Harbor, held in a pen temporarily so that they can both acclimate as well as have an inclination to return to that area as big edible fish and allow for fishing in that area. And then finally, we had a briefing on the water futures market. Information that it still feels premature to make any full assessments, but right now it doesn't look like it affects us too significantly. And we're at other items for future consideration. Please submit items for future consideration to the general manager. And then we're on to director comments.
Doug, if I may.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I would ask that today's meeting be adjourned in honor of Uradale Dell Logan Patterson. And I have a few words to speak on it, if I may.
Go ahead.
Uradale Dell Logan Patterson passed away on December 26, 2020, at home in the care of her husband, William Bill Patterson, our friend and colleague. Dell, as she was affectionately referred to by friends, was born September 26, 1938, in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. While pursuing her academic studies here in California, she gained valuable experience working with youth and the community as a playground leader in the City of Oakland's Park and Recreation Department from 1958 to 61. It was during this time that she attracted the attention of William Bill Patterson, and they were married on August 3rd, 1961. Dell was a gracious woman of God. While serving faithfully at Shiloh Church, she used her skills to help launch Shiloh's Bible College and community outreach programs. She was actively involved in Shiloh's Church's international ministry programs and prison ministry. She and her husband, Bill, were mainstays and part of the organizing backbone of many Black community and civil rights organizations here in the Bay Area. Dell was a mentor who always had a smile on her face. She had a gentle, kind, mothering spirit and did not hesitate to give a gentle word of correction. She and her husband, Bill, shared and molded many others to strive for goodness and greatness. Her mentoring taught them how to mentor others. Dell is survived by her husband of 59 years, Bill Patterson, and her son, William David Patterson, and a host of family and friends.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. So we're closing in honor of Dell?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
We'll adjourn this meeting in honor of Dell Logan Patterson. And I might say lovingly so, as we all knew Dell. Got to have a chance to meet with her as she accompanied Bill to many East Bay Mud functions. I think we all had an opportunity to spend some time with her and enjoy her warmth and her interests in what was going on with us, and not only at East Bay Mud, but with our families. And so it's a great honor to be able to adjourn the meeting today in her honor.
And we love you, Bill.
Yeah, our hearts are with you, Bill.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Bill.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everyone. The next regular meeting of the board will be held on Tuesday, January 26th. We'll have a new president then.
No, you are the new
myself.
president already.
We will meet at 1:15.
Two new presidents.
This meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Take
Take care, Bill.
I just
I'm sorry.
wanted to say one word. Am I on?
You're on. We can hear
you.
Okay. And thank you very much for that citation and closing the meeting. Because of our existence in the family of East Bay Mud, Dell and I were privileged to do lots of things and to be recognized by lots of people and participate with them. And I did want to make mention of the fact that the Oakland School District Board of Directors, the Oakland City Council, they adjourned their meeting last week in Dell's honor. And because we've had such a special relationship with so many, I wanted just to say to the East Bay Mud family, the executive team, those who are involved in the East Bay Mud Black Employees Network, all of those who sent flowers. My house was almost like a nursery. You can't believe it, how much she attracted. And I just wanted to express that to you and say, thank you, Fidel. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Take care, everyone. Be safe out there.
Be well.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye, Prez.